Pat Sajak recently indicated that his 40-year run as host of Wheel of Fortune may be coming to an end soon. That's right, Wheel of Fortune has been part of our lives for over 40 years. And while some changes have been made to the show's time and format, the program has persisted as a document of the time period from which it came. This is the EPS podcast where everything, including Wheel of Fortune, is a primary source. My guest this episode, Dawn, is a fellow podcaster, and her fabulous show, DAWNVERSATIONS, is a lot like mine in that she'll be glad to talk about most anything with her guests. When I approached her about doing a podcast together, the brainstorming for a topic began. A side mention that she had been a contestant on Wheel of Fortune solidified it for me, and what follows is what we came up with. Welcome back to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source. I'm your host, Eric Paul, and today I'm joined by the host of another podcast. This is the great thing about the podcasting universe is that we go on to our various groups and social media sites, and we put our feelers out there to try to get other guests. And I find that the best people to collaborate with are other podcasters. So today I have Dawn, who is the host of, and I love the name of your show, DAWNVERSATIONS. And I was just listening to a great episode today where you interviewed Jennifer Marshall of Stranger Things. That was a great conversation. And I mean, that's really the thrust of your show, right? Is that just similar to mine, just talk about anything, right?
Yes, exactly. I started it as a podcast about doing hair, because I was a hairstylist for 30 years. And so it was called Salonversations. And then after kind of running out of people to come on and talk customer service, I decided maybe I should rebrand and just talk to whoever I want. So It's allowed me to just talk to whoever, and I loved it.
And that's, I think, one of the great things about the internet. The internet has a lot of, dark black holes that you can go down. But one of the great things is that, I mean, more than likely, we would never have crossed paths if it wasn't for the internet.
100%,
and,
yes.
it's like, but, and we'll talk about more about this with the topic of today, because we both had a shared experience watching the same show. So you're in Nebraska, right?
Yes, Omaha.
And I'm in the state that whenever I'm starting to type in the name of the state that I'm in, Nebraska always comes up, but then I have to finish. It's in New Hampshire. So, and I also used to live in New York. So there's another all the NE starting states always get all confused when you're filling in those boxes online and stuff. But as it oftentimes happens on this show, on the EPS podcast, I come up with an idea. I'm like, oh yeah, we should talk about this. And then, I would say about half my shows, we don't even talk about the thing that initially we brainstorm. And so just the other day, you and I were going back and forth on texting and messaging, and we were trying to decide, and you said, oh yeah, I don't mind, recording over the video because I've been on television. You were on Wheel of Fortune. And
That's
so
right.
I said, that is a fantastic topic. It's a great thing to analyze because I'm a huge Wheel of Fortune fan. I watched it, when I was as young as kindergarten. I watched the daytime version, and then all through the 90s, and as a teenager growing up in the 90s, that was usually around dinner time. We ate kind of late, like 7:30 at night. The wheel was on,
Yeah, always.
Tacked on with Jeopardy, and that was, I always have those memories. So how did you go from being a fan of Wheel of Fortune to being on Wheel of Fortune?
Well, they had tryouts, and it was at the casino that is in Iowa. So Nebraska and Iowa, where we live in Omaha, it's right over the bridge. So they had at Harris Casino, they were having tryouts, and it was basically just like anybody could come, and there was thousands of people there, farmers, and just every walk of life. And you put your name kind of just in drawings, and they had a mock set up, and people could go and play, but it was all just in fun, and it wasn't Pat Sajak or Vanna White or anything like that. So then later, random names were drawn, and then you had to come back at a later date and actually try and be in front of the cameras and ad lib and all this stuff. And after that, it was almost like American Idol or something,
Oh,
where they
okay.
narrowed everybody down.
Yeah.
And then they said, okay, we're going to give you 20 names. And if your name gets called, then you might potentially get a certified letter asking you to be on the show.
Oh, wow.
So I was the 20th name that was called.
Oh,
I
neat.
was just sitting there listening to all the names, and I was like, oh, it's not my time. But yeah, they said my name. And then I was at work one day, a couple weeks later, and my son called me and he said, Mom, you've got something from Wheel of Fortune. I was like, oh my
So
God,
cool.
open it up. And he said, congratulations, you've been accepted to be on Wheel of Fortune. So basically, you're on your own after that. You call them and you
Okay.
set up almost an appointment, a reservation, and
Nice.
they tell you what hotels most people stay at, but there is no money involved.
I see.
Because as anybody that watches Wheel of Fortune knows, if you don't solve anything, they usually give you $1,000. So I
Mhm.
think that goes towards your traveling and,
Right.
hotel and stuff.
But just the experience alone. I mean, it must have
Oh
been,
my
I'm
gosh.
assuming after the first couple of years of that show being on the air, just, you could attract contestants just by saying you're going to be on Wheel of Fortune, and you get to just be one of the, like I said, I used to, we would watch Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy. I think Jeopardy came on second where we lived.
Yep.
And, it was very similar setup where you had, three contestants and, the host and everything like that. But Wheel of Fortune always just seemed a lot more, I don't know, like welcoming and like almost like more folksy and, like,
Yeah, accessible. Like
yeah, that's
anybody
a good
could
way of
play
putting it.
of any.
Yeah.
Yeah, because kids, most kids would have a tough time with Jeopardy, I would
Right.
think, but I always played Hangman growing up. So
It,
for me, that was words are
yeah.
my jam. I love everything. Oh, obviously I talk. So
Yeah.
I just love words. I love word games, puzzles, crosswords, you name it. I love it.
We used to
So,
always try to get my mom to go out for Wheel of Fortune, and this is early days of the internet, probably pre-internet. We didn't have internet at our house at all, so there was no way that she was gonna look into it beyond like, yeah, because she was really good. Like we'd watch, and within like two letters would be on the board, and she would just read it off, and I was like, you should go out for this. She's like, I don't know, and it was. And I remember I tried out for the Jeopardy thing. I did the online test, no chance in the world that I was going to be called for. I'm like, I could probably, do pretty good. It was so hard. You had to like
I can't even
type out the
imagine.
question. Yeah, you had like 9 seconds a question, and you had to type out the whole answer, and it was ridiculous. And then that was just phase one of like, 5 stages to even get on there. So when you were actually on the show, uh, was it, because I can only imagine with the lights in your face like that and the cameras and the studio audience, was it intimidating? Was it, or did they have ways to
Um,
kind of put you at ease a little bit?
They did. When you get there, they have you in like almost like a classroom type setting for a few hours. And
Mm,
they tell you, like, this is how it all goes down. This is what you do. People need to know this. They really emphasize to buy vowels, because
okay.
that was always my biggest pet peeve when I would watch. I'm like, duh, why are they asking for these? They emphasize that. And I don't know why, but they do. And so you're in this room with all these people, and they're all from all walks of life. And then there's also some people that are there that live in California that are like fill-ins in case
Oh,
somebody doesn't show or somebody backs out, or if
mhm.
there's so they have kind of standby people. And then anyway, so my point is they get you familiar with how it's going to go down. So that kind of helps shake the nerves a little bit.
Okay.
And then there's a lot of paperwork that lawyers have come up with, that you have to sign a lot of
Mhm.
stuff saying that you will not talk about what happened on the show until after it airs.
Right.
They don't want all of that out there. So you have to agree to a lot of that stuff. So by the time that's all done, you've had like your juice and donut or whatever. It's like, okay, well, let's go. Let's see what
Yeah.
it's about. So they take you out and have you practice spinning the wheel so you can kind of get a feel for how heavy
Yeah.
it is and stuff.
How
And
heavy
then
is it? Is it, because it always looks
it's
like some people kind
no,
of struggle with it. Like,
yeah, it's more that it's awkward, just
yeah.
leaning forward. I mean, it's heavy, but it's not super bad. And I'm really wimpy. I've got like T-Rex arms. So, but yeah, they also wanted to make sure that you didn't wear anything that was like trendy or anything that showed like the time of the year or whatever, just in case it was reran. And then for the women, they had to make sure that they'd wear something that was very conservative or covered so that when they bend over to do the wheel, you know, it's a family friendly show. So they really emphasize that too. But anyway, so then you practice the wheel, but they never have you practice the bonus round. That's all just, those people are fresh. They don't know what's happening. You don't practice that. And then you are sitting in the audience as like an audience member, doing the clapping and stuff until it's time for your show. And my, well, he's my husband now, but he wasn't at the time. He was in the audience, you know, our families or whoever came with us were in the audience. And then there's people that like buy tickets and they just come, like, you know, people that are just wanting for a fun activity. They're in California. Tourists. There you go. So, you know, the way that they do it, which I never knew, and it's very interesting, they film 5 shows a day or a week. So Pat and Vanna only work 1 week out of a month.
Oh, wow.
Because they've got a month's worth of shows. So you had to draw a color, and whatever color you picked and 2 other people picked, that was what we were Wednesday because we picked yellow or whatever. So we were Wednesday. So I sat in the audience for 2 episodes, and you're nervous, but like this one guy, he won like, I don't even know, it was like 80 grand or something. And you're like, oh, okay, get me out there. Like I was nervous, but they were winning like serious money. That's not just about, like, I would have done it for free. I would have, you know, it was the experience, of course, was great. But when you see people actually winning thousands of dollars, then it's like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to do this.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool how there's so many, like, they must have refined that over the years. Like, you know, they probably had a couple. Well, I mean, we can answer some of these questions right now. The person who made it was Merv Griffin, and he had a huge career as a media mogul, as a performer, as an entertainer, as a talk show host. And Wheel of Fortune is one of several game shows that he came up with. But I'm assuming that somewhere along the line, they had a trial and error. You know, they had somebody, you know, dressed up with their reindeer shirt, and they're like, oh no, we can't have that. You know, it's, or, you know, and, you know, somebody goes home. Were you like in the local paper when you got back? Where, you know, because sometimes
I was on the radio.
Like, okay.
I mean, to me, it was like a huge deal.
Yeah.
Like I told my kids, and they were like, big whoop. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
That's national television.
That's what I tried to tell them, that I was a really big deal. But no, I was on a radio station, and they just asked me, you know, what it was like. But, you know, as long as it's been on, you would think that more people you knew would have been on it. I mean, it's been on the show or on the air for decades and decades.
39 seasons they're going into right now. And I was just watching the one it stuck out to me. They did back in the early 90s, they did a music stars charity Wheel of Fortune.
Okay.
And Weird Al Yankovic was on it. And I had to rewatch it, you know, thank goodness for YouTube, because they had it. And I remember he said the funniest thing, because he won like the first round. He's like, I'll have the porcelain dog. And, you know, because he was harkening back, and Pat's like, oh, we don't do that anymore. And
oh my gosh, that's so funny.
It was like, because I remember I was like in kindergarten, we had half day kindergarten. So I would either, you know, for half the year I'd go in the morning and then come home, or in the other half the year I would stay home in the morning and go for afternoon. And I think it was during the times when I was home in the morning, I'd watch The Price is Right. I would watch Wheel of Fortune. And I remembered that, where people, once they won a round, their head would go in that little box and they'd start floating around the prize stage. And they're like, I'll have the camping gear. And, you know,
they shopped. There was like a living room set with lamps.
And so I guess, so for people who are listening to this podcast for the first time, and if you are not, and you've heard it before, never a bad time to run down what I do, essentially. And that is, I have a primary source analysis form. This can be used for anything at all. Everything is a primary source. And we answer these questions and see what it tells us about the time period in which in this case, Wheel of Fortune, it came from the 70s, but it didn't really catch on, it doesn't seem, to the 80s. That it was once Pat Sajak and Vanna White became the co-hosts, that was when the Wheel of Fortune that we know came about. And so we already talked about who likely made it, and that'd be Merv Griffith. And the material that it's made from. So you mentioned that when you tried out is in a casino, and it seems like that was his recipe for the show, was one part roulette wheel and the other part hangman. Hangman would be not as exciting. I mean, thank God, I assume they wouldn't actually have a real person as the hangman, but it's just somebody drawing the man on a chalkboard wouldn't be very entertaining for television audiences. So
Right.
instead, they put those two things together. I have a feeling that if anybody just tuned in to Wheel of Fortune on a whim, they would be able to catch on pretty quickly what's going on, right? I mean, this is
Yeah, for sure.
So the material that it's made from would be hangman and casino, roulette. And how it was made, it was dreamed up by Merv Griffith and in his spare time. But those answers that you gave about the entire process, that's also how it's made. You talked about people being of all walks of life at that, both at the tryout and at the actual filming of it and everything. What does that tell you, that show has such a wide reach? I mean, what do you think is about it that so many people from all over the country went for it and did what you did?
I think because of what we said earlier, that it just seems so accessible. It's word games, and people of all ages can do it. And there's, all intellects, and some people are really good at solving puzzles. And so it was appealing for them. And I don't know, like you said, sitting around the family table, that's what we did every night. We were at dinner, and we would have contests. Me and my brother and sister, we would have a contest. Whoever solved the bonus round could boss the other two around for the rest of the night, like make me ice cream or whatever. And I told that story in the opening of
Nice.
Wheel of Fortune, because they ask you
Yeah.
information about you and why, what do you know about Wheel of Fortune or whatever. So he said, Pat asked me, so tell me what got you interested, and I told that story, and that was just so like full circle moment to be able to go from the TV, watching it while eating dinner, to being there and saying, hi family, like crazy. But yeah, I think the reason why is just because it's so accessible. Not that it's easy.
Yeah.
It's easy from the couch. I can tell you that much. It's a lot easier from the couch.
And that kind of skips ahead to the intended audience, because I feel like that was one of the things that we liked about the show. And nothing against Jeopardy. I love Jeopardy, but it always seemed like, the people on Jeopardy were a little bit stuffier and not quite. And the people on Wheel of Fortune looked like they were literally plucked from our neighbors' homes. Hopefully they weren't 100%. Actually kidnapped, but, plucked from our home, neighbors, and went there and were like, hey, waving like, hey, I'm here, I'm one of you, I can do this too. And as a society, we have a lot of practice with these kinds of puzzle games. You think about all those family restaurants that we go to, still today, that have, the placemats, and there's a crossword puzzle or a hangman thing or a word scramble on there to pass the time. We don't like to, especially, we always have to have something to keep our minds moving and stuff like that. In fact, I have an idea. My son loves to watch Lego Masters, and I came up with an idea for a game show called Placemat Masters, where teams are given random placemats from all around the country, and they have to solve the crosswords and the word finds and the mazes and stuff, and then draw something unique on the back, as we always did.
That's funny.
I think that would be a big hit. But a show like Wheel of Fortune, I mean, we have the jumble in the newspapers most of the time. You have
and Wordle now. And Wordle's huge.
It's all, we are always looking at those things. I mean, that just speaks to the time that we have on our hands. Also, that since the show's inception, we're going on about 20 years. So 1975 is when Wheel of Fortune was first conceived. And, we're going on about 20 to 30 years after World War II, where, the pattern of life in America had kind of, hit its stride. You get up in the morning, you go to school, you go to work, you come back in the evening, you have your supper, you watch TV a little bit, get the news, and then you have a game show, right? To
Right.
lead you into
Yeah.
prime time. And, when you go out to eat, if you, maybe once a week or something like that, middle class family goes out to eat, you have, just a little brain teaser or something like that to pass your time. I think about all the times in school when you're bored, usually towards the end of the school year, and they, oh, let's play hangman, let's just make a, you put the words up there, and
Yep.
so it's like kind of baked into our social structure, thanks to the way that we all have this shared kind of pattern. It's funny because the show continues even though television's fading away pretty quickly. But it seems like Wheel of Fortune, I'm assuming that the same audience that's been watching Wheel of Fortune all this time is who still tunes in.
Oh, 100%. Yes. Yeah.
And you said that you used to find your episode on YouTube, right? You could call it up.
Yeah, I used to be able to find it, and I don't know what happened to it. But I got a DVD of it. I don't even have a DVD player anymore, so I need to figure out, get it made into a jump drive or something. Right. But yeah, and I've been reran. It has been on twice since the original air date.
Has it ever surprised you? Like, were you ever just like flipping through the channels and you're like, hey, it's me? Like,
no, I honestly don't watch it a lot anymore. I love the show, but it was just kind of like, I don't know, after I did it, I still like it, and I still like to get challenged by it, but I can't explain it. I don't know.
Like that's the ultimate. You've already kind of hit the top, so why else would you want to continue more?
Yeah.
Of something you've already done before.
It literally felt like a dream come true. It really did. I cannot even explain it any better than that. I felt like I was in a dream, because I have loved that show my whole life, basically.
Yeah.
So
and Pat Sajak and Vanna White, are they as friendly as they come off on television?
Yeah. So Vanna came into the makeup room when I was they do like spray foundation. I mean, you have to look good for TV. So they have their whole routine. And so my eyes were closed and they were spraying this makeup on my face. And I heard a voice say, "Are you excited?" And I opened my eyes and she was right there. And I was like, "Yes, Vanna, I'm very excited." She is adorable. She's little. She is not,
really?
You must put her in like 10-foot heels, I swear. She, and then her little figure. So she looks really long and lean, but she's probably like 5'6", maybe 5. She's not like super duper tall. And she just had on it like a t-shirt and yoga pants. She wasn't ready yet, and I was just like, wow, that's a celebrity. But Pat never interacted with us until right when the show started.
Okay.
Yeah.
He has his own thing that he does probably to prepare. Yes. He seems like I like his sense of humor. He always slips these little jokes and stuff. And
he's a smart aleck, big time. And I love that. I love smart Alex. So I was totally on board. But I think about it, like he's sitting here looking at the answers. He has to just sit there and be thinking like, oh,
yeah,
why aren't you getting this?
I've seen him get frustrated before. And he's even kind of snapped at the audience during the final round when he's like, all right, you need to be quiet. Can't talk, because I'm sure the impulse, because especially I didn't know this, that there's other players in the audience. So you're probably like in that puzzle solving mode.
Yeah.
That's all you can do not to shout out, like,
Yeah, because that's what you do in your living room or in your kitchen, But it definitely he has a low tolerance, I feel like, but he's very funny. It's just you just have to be normal. Not that difficult.
Word games and puzzles have been a regular feature in newspapers for well over 100 years, which indicates a literate society with leisure time built into the day across all socioeconomic areas. When TV showed up after World War II, game shows were not far behind. This was also the era of Merv Griffin, who thought up Wheel of Fortune, as well as its companion show, Jeopardy. A smart population well-versed in phrases, titles, and the ability to effectively use letters RSTLNE is revealed thanks to the long-term success of Wheel of Fortune. So you mentioned before about going off to LA. I know that Wheel of Fortune, I don't know if it's the first show to ever do this, but they used to go on tour, right? They would go to different cities in the country and do, I wonder if they kept the same model of doing like 5 shows in one day kind of thing when they went on tour. But you had to go to LA. And where exactly was it? Like, I don't need the cross streets or anything, but was it part of one of those big studio?
Yeah, it was. I think it's Carson City is the city that it's located in, but like Universal Studios is right there.
Okay.
And it was actually it's the same set that the Wizard of Oz. Wizard of Oz was filmed at. And then next door is Jeopardy. So it's super cool. I mean, it's weird. It's just surreal to be there, you know?
Well, for somebody from Omaha, that must have been incredible though, because, you know, that's on the big balloon at the end of the Wizard of Oz is Omaha, State Fair. And
I always love Wizard of Oz.
Kind of hinting before about the populist appeal of the Wheel of Fortune, that it's, just ordinary folks on that show, and that the whole populism aspect of the Wizard of Oz. So it all comes, like you said, full circle. That's kind of perfect. And the wheel is a circle. So there you go. This is all. So you went to LA. You went and saw the site. You made a vacation out of it, right? It wasn't just like, oh really? No. Just like a day?
Yeah. My husband we were just newly dating, and I was a single parent. And I got this opportunity, and I was just like, okay, now I can go, but I don't have any money. So he was like, I'll help you out, we'll go. And so he arranged for the flights and stuff, and we flew out next day, filmed the show, flew back the next day. So it was very much a whirlwind, but it was still cool.
And I have that as one of the questions: where was it made, and the locations associated with it. And what that always tells me is, well, a number of things, but in this case, for a television program and a game show like that, you would think that actually a place like Omaha would make more sense, because it's pretty central in the country. It's accessible by road for a great number of the population, and that's one of the reasons why Walt Disney was looking into building his second theme park in St. Louis originally, is because he's like, well, the Disneyland is out in Southern California. It's only like a third of the country I can easily get to my park. If I put it somewhere in that central Midwest section, that'll get a lot more people there.
Sure.
And then he settled on Orlando because it was affordable, and that accounts for the East Coast people too.
Yeah.
But when it comes to a production like a game show, you really need to have cameramen and set dressers and makeup artists, right? You need to have all of the crew and the announcers and everything, and the talent just is in LA. I mean, just by it's nowhere else. You can't really find it. I guess New York would be the other alternative.
Sure.
But having somewhere like Los Angeles, and my understanding is that the main reason that LA became the center of entertainment isn't necessarily just because it's bright and sunny most of the year. That's a nice aspect of it, because you can film outside, and especially in the early days of movies when they couldn't produce the kind of manufactured light that would actually help them film, the outdoor bright and sunny most of the year helped. But it was the fact that they were so far away from Washington, where all of the copyrights and the patents for everything from the cameras they were using or modifying, or the stories that they were telling, so there was no enforcement of it. Like, so if you're making a movie that's loosely based on somebody's story that they've copyrighted, back in the early part of the 20th century, LA you couldn't get further away from law enforcement than Southern California.
That's funny. I did not know that.
And so it built this huge entertainment empire. So by the 70s and 80s, yeah, of course, if you're going to put a game show on, you're not like yeah, let's do it in Atlanta. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah, you're gonna put it on in, the same place that you have. We're finding all those people to, in the that you see in the credits, all live around there, and
sure.
I find that so interesting too. You said there's like people on standby. Did they get like sad like when they weren't called up, or they're just like, okay, like just like wander off, or
Yeah, I have some mixed emotions about that because the episode that I was on, the girl that ended up being one of the people that ended up being in my little group was from California and was a
okay.
stand-in person, and she ended up winning. So
Oh,
I'm like, I came all the way from Omaha, and
yeah.
somebody that lives here
You have no
won. That was
idea.
just like on her lunch hour or something.
I
So
I
yeah.
think it was around, I think it was Wheel of Fortune recently that somebody from Massachusetts won a vacation to New Hampshire.
Oh
And
my
they're
God.
like, oh, okay. Like that's like you
That's
getting it's
hilarious.
like, here's a
Yeah.
vacation to Kansas City. Like, oh, great. Like I can go down the
I was
road.
just there last week.
That's so crazy. So, going back up to the maker's role or status in society. Merv Griffith is the person who came up with the show. He was involved with it throughout its run. Uh, I did a little bit of research on Merv. I try not to do too much when I do these podcasts. I like to have the primary source speak for itself. But I was interested because he seems like the kind of person that only the TV age would have worked out for him. Like if he lived in any other time period, he probably would have just stayed as like a nightclub singer, or maybe a
Yeah.
stand-up comedian or something like that.
Right. Like
But
he created his world.
right. And without him, television probably would not have had the same, look to it that we are familiar with now. And I like the way you put that he created his own world. And there's only a few names, I think like Ted Turner might enter into the same category as a Merv Griffith kind of thing. It feels like a very American story almost,
Mm-hmm.
like that only in this country could somebody become, very, very wealthy from entertaining and coming up with new ways to get the media, masses to continue watching television. And do you think that he'd be, he passed away, more than a few years ago, but uh, do you think he'd be disappointed with the migration away from television if he was still alive, if he was still active today? Or do you think that somebody like him or anybody involved in, say, the world that you entered for that when you went to the show, um, would be like, no, we'll come back. We'll be back again someday.
Yeah, I think it will come full circle, but I think he'd be more disappointed in that, to me, to the best of my knowledge, he created things that were all pretty family friendly.
Yeah.
And now to get, good ratings or numbers, you have to have a lot of cussing or, sex scenes and all that stuff. And that's just not what it seemed he was about. He was trying to find things that would entertain families and,
Mhm.
have something that the family all could watch and participate in on TV instead of it's just there's just not that anymore. But I'm sure it'll come back around.
Yeah. I mean,
There's just too many people that enjoy it.
right. And during his lifetime, and I don't think that he's detached from this. We see televisions in households, and I think it actually became a census question, or at least some kind of polling question, that by the end of the 1970s, close to 100% of American households had a TV, at least one set in their house.
Right.
And so it's, the odds are, speaking of a game of chance, the odds are that you're going to have, you know, lots of families watching. It's not just going to be, single men watching.
Right. Right.
It's going to be, and the programming reflects that. And going back to when I first started watching Wheel of Fortune, I was a little kid, and my mom didn't have any trouble, knowing that I was going from Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers to Wheel of Fortune and Price is Right. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it seems like I watched a lot of TV, but
I
going
think
back,
all us kids did growing
yeah.
up. You stay home sick from school, you watch Price is
Oh,
Right
that's the
and
best.
Brady
Yeah.
Bunch and Gilligan's Island and all
I,
of that.
I saw a lot of these shows are in reruns, even the game shows. You can watch old Jeopardies and old Prices Rights on Netflix and stuff like that. And a friend of mine put up a funny thing, observation. He's like, I just watched the Prices Right, from the 80s, the Bob Barker one. And he's like, I am now hungry for, and not just for any food, he's like, for lunch. And he's like, it needs to be a grilled cheese sandwich and tomato soup with a glass of milk. And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And, it's like
chicken noodle, Campbell's chicken noodle.
He and I grew up, just a few blocks from each other, but I'm like, I guarantee you that, and you're laughing right now, we all have that experience, is that shared, mass media, pop culture. And that's how it becomes pop culture, because it's popular,
right,
with the people kind of thing of, we are all part of this, even if it's not at the exact same time, throughout the evening. We're all there, and we all, kind of experience the same thing. Sick days, snow days, that was Price is Right time. You get to catch up with, the consumer prices. So one of the questions that comes up is, what ideas or behavior does this convey? Is there a strategy to Wheel of Fortune? I know a lot of it has to do with just the chance of, you spin the wheel. And I always feel bad for the people that get like lose a turn, bankrupt, like one after the other. And like they're entering into the last round, they haven't won any money. And you're like, what was your strategy going into it? Was it just like, whatever comes up, I'll go with it? Or
well, you're in a group of like-minded people. Everybody there knew how to solve puzzles. There was nobody there that was smarter than anybody else. You are at the mercy of the wheel. That's it. Because that's when you get your turn, and if you spin it and get bankrupt, then it's the next person's turn. And pretty much, I think pretty much everybody knows what the puzzle answer is the closer you get to it. So then you're just like, do I go for it? What do I do? I hit bankrupt a couple times, and thankfully I didn't have a ton of money, but it was still, it's just part of the game. And so I didn't really have a strategy, but I don't know if your future questions are going to ask how I did, but I was quick on the draw. I was an Atari kid, so I was quick on the draw. And so I solved all three of the toss-up puzzles. So that was, to me, gratification, showing to my children and anybody else watching that I knew how to play and that I could solve a puzzle.
That's
that
so
was
huge.
rewarding. Yeah. But I was quick with the clicker.
I used to always, like I said, I'd always feel bad for the people that didn't have anything. And because that there was a process, there was a vetting process. They didn't just show up, one day. They it's kind of like when you watch, a TV show or even like, like a college basketball game or something like that. And there's a guy sitting on the bench and you're like, he was probably like the best player at his high school,
really.
He's just, riding the bench for his team now. So it's like, if you're on that show, it means that you know what you're doing. It's just the things are not going your way. So it's always nice when they get like, $1,500 or something like that. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Now they won that round, so they can get, walk away with something.
Right.
So did you win the whole game, or you just won enough that you felt satisfied?
No, I did not win the whole game. I won $6,000 in cash because of those toss-up puzzles. So you get 1,000 for the first one, 2,000 for the second one, and then 3,000. So I had 6,000 in cash. You have to pay taxes in California and Nebraska on that, but since to them they said it was a small amount, they didn't really take that much out. I think I ended up getting 5,800, which is great. But the guy that was playing to the right of me, he was who you were talking about. He was not getting his turn. He wasn't, every time he spun, and he was a principal of a school and stuff. And when we would go to commercial break, we'd all get a water or whatever. They would just take a break. And he was like, I'm not getting anything and I'm never going to win. And I was like, trying to be his cheerleader, like, you've got this, just keep spinning the wheel. And so he ended up getting second place, but the girl, Ashley, to my left, I was in the middle. She had the day of her life. She got a car, she got a trip, she got cash, she took it all. So I was in last place, but I had $6,000.
I was going to say, well, that was always one thing I liked about Wheel of Fortune over Jeopardy, because for a long time, I think they've gone back on it, but for a long time, Jeopardy, you wouldn't win anything. you know,
Right.
if you didn't win the game, you walked home, you know, and you may have had to walk home with
Yeah.
nothing. And it must be fun to be like a tax preparer in California, you know, with all these game show winnings. Like it's not a usual
Yeah.
thing elsewhere in the country. Like, okay, you know, how to be a, you know, who wants to be a millionaire?
Right.
Actually, I think that was in New York, but yeah, that's like the nitty gritty thing that a lot of people don't think about.
Oh,
Did that
totally.
factor into your decision to go out there in the first place? You're like, you know, I might not win anything, or if I do, I'm going to have to pay, you know, some taxes on this.
Yeah, no, I didn't think about any of that clearly because I had no idea that how
Yeah.
I was even gonna get out there. But no, I would have done it. I'll do it again anytime, you know, but there's all these stipulations. I think I can be on it again now. I think I had to wait 7 years. But yeah, I would totally do it again for $0. It was the experience. I wish everybody could do it. It was so fun. It was so fun.
That sounds, and it seems like they kind of are just by existing and having the show run, and that's probably what propels them, is that not only are they giving entertainment to people at home, but they're making so many people's day. I remember this one guy, he was like the nicest guy I ever saw on that show. When they, you know, introduced him, he just said, I'd like to take a, you know, I'd like to just say how nice it is to meet you, Pat. This is, you know, and Pat was like, oh, okay. He's like, it's really nice to be here. And he just seemed like a gentle guy. And I'm like,
Yeah,
you know, at the beginning of the game. So I'm like, I hope that guy wins something because he seems just like a nice man. You know,
right,
he'll probably go back and like, you know, donate it to the Boy Scouts or something.
right.
You know, so that must have been just the neatest experience. And so you
Yeah,
highly
it was.
encourage. There's been a lot of game shows that have come and gone over the years, and like
Mhm.
I was going back before, you know, Wheel of Fortune is pretty easy to catch on what's going on when you watch it. It's not complicated. There's some other ones that no wonder they bit the dust, even some that Merv Griffith came up with himself. Like you read some of the descriptions of it, you're like, what? Or
Yeah.
you know, and there was a kind of a return of the game show, the primetime game show, probably about 20 years ago now, a little bit less, with like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and Deal or No Deal and things like that. Did you ever have interest in pursuing one of those, or were they
I
just
would have
not?
done Price is Right. If I wouldn't have been able to be on Wheel of Fortune, I would have wanted to be on Price is Right. That just looked like such a fun show, how
Yeah.
people would dress up in the audience and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that would be the only other one. I always
Yeah.
liked Family Feud too, but that's taken a weird turn. I don't really
Yeah.
watch it anymore, but I love Steve Harvey. I just think that the show itself is not what it used to be. So
Well,
I
like
don't,
you said, they've kind of gone blue a little bit. Like some of the
yeah.
questions that they ask, you're like, what? Like, you know,
It's
why?
pretty much all the questions they ask. I'm just like, this isn't for me. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm not a
it's
prude. I just think, you know, like make some questions normal.
right. And but I guess
Yeah.
that's a reflection of the society, at
Right.
least what they perceive of us, that
Mm-hmm.
we're interested in. Or maybe they just ran out of, like, you know, what's the first thing that you find in your drawer in the kitchen, you know? Like they don't have
Right.
that
Yeah. Just run out
question,
of ideas.
and they're like,
But
okay, you know.
they are on Netflix. They're showing old episodes of Wheel of Fortune. So of course, the first thing I did was get on
You
there and
look
look
for
and
your
see
own.
if
Yeah.
it, yeah, it's not on there yet. So hopefully someday it will
Yeah,
be.
I'd like
That'd
to
be pretty cool.
roundabout. When were you on? What year was
In
that?
2011.
Okay, so
Um,
about a
so
decade
yeah,
ago.
I went out on my kid's first day of school, so mom of the year. And so that was August 17th that we recorded it, and then it didn't air until October the 8th, and then I didn't get my money until February. So it's like a 3 month.
Mhm.
And so in that time, you're not supposed to tell people how you did or, you know, anything like that. So everybody knew that I went, and I was just
Yeah.
like, and they're like, did you get to?
Was that hard to keep it,
Oh my gosh, yes. I'm a
mom?
blabbermouth. It was so difficult, but it was also fun because my parents threw a launch party for me, and they had like Wheel of Fortune. They had a walk of fame with the
Awesome.
Hollywood stars, and it was really cool. So it was so fun to come, you know, go to that and watch everybody's reactions. And people just joked that maybe when it came on again, I would actually win. Maybe if they rerun it, you'll
Yeah,
win this
you can
time, you
edit
know?
it and, you
Yeah.
know, go back in there. And
Yeah.
so it's and I'm looking at the questions, and you know, as it usually happens when I do this, like we never go in the straight order, you know, that
Sure.
I have. It's always, you know, bouncing around. And I still, I gotta say, like going back to some of those other shows, there's a reason why they went away and Wheel of Fortune persists, because they're just, I mean, it has like the right combination. I've always liked how bright Wheel of Fortune is. The wheel is rainbow colored. You got the almost like over the top glamorous Hollywood look to the set. Like even when they
Right.
refined it a little bit and changed the letters to television screens, that Vanna turned.
Yeah.
And but so you were there actually when they in that era where they stopped using the music, the theme song, right? Because it was they had music, but it wasn't the same.
Yeah, I know that
Do.
song. I can't remember if it was
And
on or not. When I don't know when that stopped.
so I was reading about it, and it said I think it was late 90s, early 2000s, and then they brought it back last year.
Okay, so then
um
yeah, it wouldn't
so
have been
they
on.
for some, and I guess they tried a couple different variations of it, like something called Wheel 2000 for like little kids to play. um that didn't catch on. It's like, don't mess with something that works, because, and I know they changed some stuff. I kind of liked it when they brought in, like, there's a huge cash value right in the middle of the bankrupt. It was like what, $10,000 sliver that you
Mhm.
could land on. But it just seems like one of those programs that uh it will always surpass those others, as long, and I think as long as Pat and Vanna are the hosts, because
Yeah.
without them, I love Drew Carey. I think he's great and really funny and stuff, but I've never watched Price is Right with him as the host. It just
Yeah,
doesn't.
he's not a Bob Barker.
No, Barker was it. He was the guy, and
Yeah.
his affection for animals was particularly endearing. Always
Hmm.
reminding us to spay and neuter our pets at the event.
Right.
And and Pat Sajak seems to be quite the philanthropist as well. I lived in Maryland for a little while, and I remember driving through Annapolis one time, and there was the Pat Sajak, like, cancer wing or something like that at a hospital.
Oh, I didn't
And
know that.
like I had to do a double take. Like I drove past it again. I was like, what? Like, Pat, is that the Pat Sajak? And once again, thanks to the internet, I looked it up, and it's like, yeah, he has some kind of local connection there, and he endowed the hospital with lots of money one time, to, and of course, I'm sure everybody joked, including myself. I think I did, that maybe as soon as you walk in, they had a wheel that this is how much of the actual money that the hospital gets. They're like,
Right,
every
right.
day they spin it, like, oh, only 250 today, and, or
Oh,
for this
that's
week or
funny.
whatever. But that just speaks to how much that show has found its way into our pop culture too. That it's been on references. I think it was Martin Short's character.
Oh my
Ed
gosh, on
Grimley
Saturday
was like
Night Live.
obsessed with Pat Sajak. And
I forgot about that. That was my favorite.
I remember one of my friends in high school, we had a study hall in the cafeteria, and it was like one of the first couple of days of school, and like the woman didn't, whoever's monitoring the study hall didn't know our names, and she gets to my friend, and he's like, Pat Sajak, and
Oh,
she like writes it down. Like, well, he's here, and
oh, that's
um
funny.
so it's definitely found its way, because it's so simple, it's so vibrant, it's so happy, and they're part of our lives, really. It's
Yeah,
almost
how
like an
growing
extension
up.
of your family, and something that is part of that TV generation, that, like, I'm a high school teacher, and kids just don't watch TV anymore. I'll try to reference with them programs they'll watch to a certain extent, the programs like Stranger Things, but it's not
Right.
appointment TV anymore. They're not. um so I feel like the 80s and the 90s really like the golden age of appointment television, whether it be
Hmm.
daily, I'm tuning into the Wheel of Fortune at this time, no matter where I am, or like Thursday nights are this program, and I have to watch it, and if I miss it, it's not the same kind of thing. Whereas is nowadays it's a pleasant surprise that they keep going, but I gotta say, it's like, how much longer do they have of
Yeah.
new, cultivating a new audience, because kids are there's they might play it on their phone, right, themselves,
Mhm.
for like an app that gets the money or something like that, but it's just not the same thing at all.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that we made this work.
Yeah, me too.
I think that I'll never turn down a topic. That's the essence of this program. So I have when you mentioned Wheel of Fortune, I'm like, because we were going to talk about Omaha, which I'm still interested in. I liked your idea
Yeah.
that you sent along of like doing an episode. We can do that super fast right now, like because railroad history is something I love, and that's the
Yeah.
history of Omaha. But I'm so glad that you said Wheel of Fortune. I'm like, yes, I want to analyze a game show. I think it's such a
Yeah. That's so funny.
such a fun thing, and I want everybody that listens to the EPS podcast to tune into DAWNVERSATIONS. You won't be disappointed. It is just one of those kind of shows you can get
That's sweet.
lost in. Like I not in a good way, not like I don't know what's going on, but just like I said, just 45-minute conversations. You have guests from all different backgrounds, all different professions. I heard that you had a comedian on from Boston a few weeks ago, right?
Yeah. Did.
Jerry, not Seinfeld, but
Jerry Caruso.
Caruso. Yeah, he was really funny and entertaining, and I think that's one day, and we could do it at any time. Really, somebody could analyze all these podcasts as primary sources of the 2020s.
Sure.
Because I think we both started ours for the same reasons, right? Because we're like, I need to talk to somebody. I need to connect and because this quarantine business really, and it benefited us from getting used to talking over the computer to people. I remember the first couple of times I ever did like a Skype. I was like,
Yeah.
looking at, I was like, oh, I don't know how this works. Can you hear me? And now I'm like, yeah, Zoom, just call it up, and it's now become part of it. So
yeah, it turns into a habit. Yeah.
It's,
well, you're into pop culture, and I was always a huge Johnny Carson fan. So to have a show that's a variety show, to me, like his, is just like, this is awesome. It's just as great as being on Wheel of Fortune. I love it every time. I can't believe I get to do this.
It's just like that classic, we've been chatting for a couple, weeks now about this, and I feel weird. And I mean this as in like, I never thought I would be doing it by saying like my next season, or, this is my tune in my next episode. So I'm like, I did some radio in
Stay
college,
tuned.
and I think if you went through some of the blank tapes, those Memorex tapes around my parents' house, you'd probably hear more than a few like of my news reports that I used to do with my recorder and stuff like that. I've always had an interest in radio. I've always liked it, and the medium, but like being able to just be like, yeah, starting season 2 soon, just trying to get some new guests, like that's just such a weird thing, because it's not like I went to I didn't go to California, I didn't go to LA to chase my dream and become part of the I didn't go around the country from radio job to radio job, and instead I just bought a microphone and a mixer and plugged it into my computer kind of thing. And so it's very much like
it's awesome,
very democratic form of communication. Everybody can do it, and Wheel of Fortune fits right in with that too. It's a very accessible, welcoming show, and I'm glad I was able to welcome you to this accessible show too. So I want to thank everybody for listening to the EPS podcast today. I want to thank Dawn from DAWNVERSATIONS. Check out her podcast wherever you get them, and we'll talk to you next time. This is season 2 of the EPS podcast. I hope you've enjoyed listening to what you've heard so far. Full-length episodes like this one are being delivered on Thursdays, while shorter episodes, the products of my EPS Alive exhibits, come out on Tuesdays. If you like what you hear, consider becoming a patron by going to patreon.com/EPS podcast. Follow the show on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. I look forward to you tuning in again to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.